Everyone has good days and bad days. It's almost part of the human experience. Sometimes I wake up some days very energized and other times not so much. So how do we have more good days that will ultimately culminate into a good life? I present to you science, my proposed solution for how we can engineer our everyday to make it incrementally better. Ultimately, the goal is to get from A to B, from our current situation to our desired outcome. Through this talk, I'm going to be going over how I implemented this in my life and the areas of focus, learnings, and finally reflections. Now, what do I mean by the scientific method? This is from Britannica, stating that the scientific method is a mathematical and experimental technique employed in the sciences. But this definition is one that I like much better from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The scientific method is the attempt to discern the activities by which success is achieved. This really speaks to what I'm going to be using it for today, as it will be the indicator of what we use to add value to our lives. Now to the good part, the process. Over a 2-month period, I set out to run these small, almost experimental tests on myself, which involved choosing an area of focus, formulating different hypotheses and multiple almost guesses of how my life would change, and then studying it from there. We're going to go introduce you to my examples. First page of the notebook, starting off strong with observe, guess, experiment, and measure, the backbone of the scientific experience as we know it. And this is how I organized my findings. This is the hypothesis. And I did it by section. Therefore, at the top, I put the section, and then this is really the brainstorm of everything that I was curious about. Because when we seek to change something, how will we know how to change it if we don't know what we are changing? For example, the sections were numbered by category. This one here is focus related, on how do I focus best, being the central question. To pull out some interesting examples, do I study better in the morning or the night? Age-old question. And my prediction was that I might study better in the morning. Would I be more productive in a non-home environment? Again, prediction is that yes, working outside my own home, I might have less distractions. And I'd like to take you guys inside my brain a little bit of how we explore essentially my thought process. So at the top, the hypothesis. For the sake of this example, this is, will my focus improve after caffeine? There's 2 branches. If it is yes, then there's a few things, how much, and then how often. So for this example, I ran 4 different types: coffee, green tea, matcha green tea, and then black tea. And the interesting thing was, not all of them are the same. It was interesting to me that even the same person can metabolize different types of caffeine at different rates. Clearly, if it is no, then we return to the list, coming back to the pick, test, repeat from the first page. My areas of focus. I didn't want this to be too long, so I decided on 3. And when we go about to implement the scientific method and implement this curiosity in improving our lives, it has to be directed in a general direction. The ones I decided on were focus, nutrition, and cleaning. More of as to why. Focus is what gets things done, especially in the academic sector. Nutrition is mainly to streamline, and I was really curious on how different foods affect essentially how we feel. And cleaning being the influence of our environment. I would like to introduce you to Saikichi Toyota. His method, the 5 whys that he is credited for, is one that I used multiple times in the creation of this experiment. As described, it is by repeating why 5 times, the nature of the problem, as well as the solution, becomes clear. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard, but Toyota is famous for launching Toyota, the car manufacturer. But in Japan, he is even more famous and hailed as the second father of the Japanese Industrial Revolution. Now, the 5 whys sits adjacent with this idea of examining what we do and why we do it. Because it marries very well with exploring the different thought patterns we have. For example, this is also referred to as RCA, or root cause analysis, which is when we are faced with a problem, how do we get to the bottom of it? How do we find the true underlying issue, pattern, or what we seek to change? And this could be employed to figure that out. Ultimately, the purpose of all this experimental and reflection is to find what works. Many self-help advice will give you one direction and then tell that everyone is different. And that is true, because depending on your personalities and thoughts and experiences, people respond to things in different ways. And that is obviously to build your toolbox, because the end goal is to have a list of techniques that you can draw on whenever necessary. Now, this is the second part, documentation. These 2 pictures are from section 2 and section 3, respectively. And this is how I decided to lay out this experiment, with the date on the left side and then what I tried in the middle. Documentation is crucial for this, because if we don't know the effect of what we employed, how will we ever understand the effect it has on our lives? Many times I find that in experimentation, or when we elect to try something new and don't have concrete evidence to track it and back it up, it's no wonder why new habits fail or new hobbies disappear, when there is nothing to go back to as to how often that we did it. On to the learnings. This is also an example of the formatting, the date on the side, and I also did the things that I tried. Example is on November 22nd. Experiment, tried walking before studying. Hypothesis is, will my focus be drastically improved after a brisk walk? Answer, yes, but only for studying immediately after. Do not delay. Now, this is something that I was able to take forward, as after having experimented with it, it was something much more natural to do, because I already knew how I would respond to this in advance. Onto my self-experiment learnings. This is the good part, and comes back to why this was an endeavor in the first place. I will share with you all my most surprising learnings from each of the 3 sections, and essentially the process, yes. So, my most surprising learning from section 1, focus. Hypothesis. Focus music will keep me more on task and in the zone, hence better focus. Seems logical, right? However, the reality was that I work better without focus music, provided it is reasonably quiet, and oddly, I found most of it to be repetitive and quite distracting. So I noticed over a span of 3 to 5 days is what I would do is I would get ready to study. I would cue up the focus music, and then I would decide I didn't like the focus music, and I would go on YouTube and look for more focus music. Soon 30 minutes will have passed, and I was still looking for focus music. Not very focused, right? My most important, most surprising learning From section 2, hypothesis. Eating a heavy breakfast would not agree with my stomach. The reality, on most days, I felt much better eating more food for breakfast. This brings me to what I will reiterate in the conclusion, which is how sometimes we have beliefs and patterns we do almost unconsciously. And without having these experiments to challenge them, it's something that I would have never considered. Logically, in my mind, I just assumed that breakfast was a lightest meal and moved on with my day. And until I had tried it, this is the much better option, at least for myself. From section 3, cleaning. Hypothesis. Since I am a decisive person, I should be able to declare items with one look through. The reality is, this process is in 2 stages. So this isn't referring to cleaning as in decluttering. And the 2 stages was getting rid of things once and then sleeping on it and trying to go through it again. And it turns out that this is a completely normal occurrence, and that is vetted by different authors, for example, Marie Kondo in her book Spark Joy, as the second sweep in which we reevaluate what we are choosing to give away. So identity aside, this one was the most interesting. My final reflection. Upon doing this, it made me think of how many pre-existing beliefs and patterns I really had. Without self-experiments such as these, there are many things I wouldn't have considered and essentially have stopped me from doing what is best for myself and my life in the best way possible. Hence having more good days and feeling the best you can to show up in the world. Some food for thought. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of the game. This is by Civilization 4 designers, Soren Johnson and Sid Meier, and I thought it was interesting because as this talk's cornerstone is optimization, I do believe that we should not optimize only for productivity, but also optimize for our happiness. Going through this project, there were days where self-compassion was desperately needed. Either I did not fill out the objective I set to do, or I had tried it and gotten very, very off track. Yes, I documented it anyways. And instead of treating them as personal failures or affronts to your identity, I would like to reiterate how this can be just another data point if we take the approach of the scientist. It was more credible and essentially easier when we can separate our own negative feelings and have the objective lens of running an experiment. Therefore, as I mentioned, our failures are not failures, they're simply teaching us where to look. And these are the benefits of being what I would like to call a self-scientist. The first one is self-discovery. And this is one of the main takeaways where upon running small self-experiments, this is where we can learn the most about ourselves and how we function best. Moving into the world, this will be valuable in many ways, at least I have experienced its benefits, and would like to say that it helps to know who you are, what you stand for, and what makes you happy. Second one is personalized set of techniques for your goals. Even though I chose these 3 sections, I could have chosen any other one had I had different goals and needed something different to explore. Therefore, after being inquisitive and having that base curiosity, that is when we can personally decide which direction you wish to take. The last one, I'm a bit biased, but I find it very fun to experiment on myself, to be your own lab rat in a sense. And it motivates me to know that it's almost like moving one step closer to your goals, and instead of it being a concrete goal, this is something that can supplement that and make reaching your goals easier. Finally, if you take anything away from this talk, know that being your own self-scientist can lead to great results. Thank you.